أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We are going through the vegetables or plants that Islam classifies as haram, not edible, due to its effect. If the vegetable or the plant that we eat or consume or use that goes into our body affects our intelligence, our intellect, our aql, whatever it is, small or big, large quantities regarded as haram. And we gave examples. Or leads to any loss of life, fatal to our life, or harmful to our general health, leads to deterioration, leads to sicknesses, cancer, and what have you. They're all forms of haram. And we have quoted and cited smoking. And of course, it caused some concern within our listeners. Islam prohibits all forms of vegetations or plants, for it affects our health and adversely causes loss of judgment. Alcohol and other fermented drinks are all haram. Simple Sharia rule is kullu muskirin haram. Everything that which intoxicates, small or large quantities, are all haram. I've heard this argument so many times from especially young brothers. How about in moderation? Astaghfirullah. Once every blue moon, whatever that means. Technically there is a definition of blue moon, but we won't go into it. Oh, but it was on a very special occasion. Allah will not write any sin for me. Excuse me? What, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change the Sharia law for you because you are attending to the wedding of your best friend? And therefore you can consume alcohol in that day, a day, and it will not be haram? Astaghfirullah al-azim. Tell me, what's the difference between drowning 200 deep in the water or just 2 or 3 centimeters below the surface of the swimming pool? What's the difference between that drowning or that drowning? You end up losing your life, you're dead. Islamically, this much haram is equal to that much haram. No difference. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited alcohol, drinking, to a nation, to the Arabs, who were very well known in the world for their years, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years of collection of wines in their cellars. There was not a single incident, an occasion where they will not share alcohol like the West today. When you go into someone's house, they offer you alcohol, their best offer. They used to drink a lot. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala slowly commanded Muslims in a gradual manner, actually in 3 different separate sections, separate times. Eventually it was all made haram. When it was made haram, I'm not going to go into how the prohibition happened. When it was made haram, Muslims were so ready, their imans were so perfect, alhamdulillah. The streets of Medina, streets of Mecca, stunk with alcohol for months on end, because they brought all their barrels and cracked it open and just let it go on the streets. Stink! Fermented alcohol. Ali karramallahu wajhah is reported, it is reported that he has said, If this little finger of mine, this little pinky of mine were to touch any alcohol, I would not think twice before I chop it off. Astaghfirullah, brother, what are you talking about? Muslims chop their fingers off if they touch alcohol? No. Don't get me wrong. Imam Ali karramallahu wajha is trying to emphasize a point. How to keep away from harams. The difference between a companion, a sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and us is this point. Ali karramallahu wajha says, a companion, he says, as far as haram is concerned, I will keep away from it so much so that even if I were to touch with my little finger, I'll chop it off, which is haram to chop off fingers in Islam. But he says, I will not do it. He's just emphasizing, exaggerating the point. And the Muslims of today, when you say this is haram to do so, they said, let me think about it. Let's have a discussion about it. Academic discussion. Convince me otherwise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is rijsum min amali shaitan. This is a filth from the doing of shaitan. And it's haram to do so. Little of it or too much of it is equal in terms of haramness. You cannot change anything. This is the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sharia. You have no leg to, you have no case to argue at all. As a Muslim, you're supposed to say, Amanna wa saddaqna. I listen, I hear and obey, and just continue practicing abstinence from the haram things. Now, I know that some of us are heavy smokers. And perhaps for the first time, I was so harsh on those brothers and sisters who smoke, without pointing any fingers to anybody. But it is harmful. Sharia disallows it. It is harmful to you. Ask your wife when you go to sleep, in the bed, your breath is disgusting. Huquq al-ibad, rights of human beings. On the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bring you together. And that person will find a case against you to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Smoking. It is not an intelligent thing to do, but it is a bad habit, like many other sins that we have formed. It's very difficult to kick. Yes, I know it is, but it is not impossible. It is not impossible. You need to determine, and you need to know the consequences of your action. Not only the damage that causes to yourself, but the people whom you love, the people around you. So you need to give up this nonsense. The image of the Aussies, as far as Muslims are concerned, as far as Middle Eastern people are concerned, alias for Muslims, they have one shisha, one nargile in one hand, and a belly dance on the other side. Is this the image of Islam and Muslims? Is this what you're trying to portray? Even, brother, in the tobacco, in the bottle, the shisha, nargila, we just put a different flavor. It's not a smoke actually. Whatever it is, what are you trying to imitate? What are you trying to imitate? Like kids, if you see little kids pretending to have a little smoke, the pretend smokes, lollies. If we see them, what are we doing? You're forming a habit. Stop it. We won't even let our children touch that fake smokes. How about us? We need to be careful. The heaviest smokers in the world are Muslims. Go to Indonesia, amazing. Go to Malaysia, it's amazing. And it is encouraged. It is encouraged. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us. Third type of thing that we eat in this world, besides minerals and vegetables and plants, is animals. We're carnivores. Islam is very particular when it comes to, our fiqh is very particular when it comes to halal and haram and the classification of things. These were classified 1400 years ago. It is not something new. So our duty and your duty is to learn this. And inshallah, maybe some of the information that I'm going to present to you may not be relevant to you right now. But ilm is ilm. When you acquire knowledge, whether you use it or not, still is the greatest form of ibadah. When you learn something, you put it in somewhere in the back of your mind, in your memory. And when the time comes, oh yeah, we learned at Coburg Mosque that this was haram, we should not touch it. But if you didn't know, when you come across with that situation, that condition, you might fall into that haram, and it's too late afterwards. Remember the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, if you consume even a little morsel of food which is haram, your salat, your dua is not accepted for 40 days. Very dangerous. Food, halal food, is the essential ingredient in Islamic development, Islamic personality. Therefore, let's look at the things which are considered to be animals. And Islam in generally, right at the top, as far as eating animals are concerned, we divide into two sections. Those live on the earth, on the surface of the earth, on the land, and those live in the sea. Two types of food we derive. Fish kind, the seafood, and the other one is the other animals. So, remember, not every Muslim 1400 years ago, 1500 years ago, or 500 years ago lived in cities, urbanized cities like these. Highly developed places with supermarkets. Supermarkets are a new phenomenon. Didn't exist 40, 50 years ago. It was all corner shops. Even before that, it was more difficult to find supermarkets. People lived with animals. People lived with agriculture in the farmland. So they need to know all these laws. So inshallah, let's go through. Those live in the sea. Islam allows us, it makes it halal for us to eat all forms of seafood. Having said this, with the exception of Hanafi school of thought, Hanafis in particular, Ahnaf, they put a condition in terms of seafood. Hanafi ulama, Hanafi books teach us that all the things from the sea is halal provided that it is fish kind. Only fish kind, not crustaceans, not the shellfish, not the crabs, lobsters, prawns. They regard it as makruh tahrimi, close to haram makruh. This is a position in the Hanafi school. And even within the Hanafi school, there are two schools. There is the Indian subcontinent Hanafis and the Middle Eastern, the Shami, Syrian Hanafis. When it comes to gambari, what's gambari? The prawns. They say the Syrian ones, it is a fish kind, it's not a crustacean. I don't know how, but the Indians are very particular in this and says, no, crustacean is a crustacean, you can't eat it, it's makruh to do so. But all the other three schools, Maliki, Hanbali and the Shafi'i, they all say it is absolutely halal to do so. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah says, if I see my father coming out of the sea, I will also eat him. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that it is halal to do so. Seafood. All forms of fish is halal to eat. Whales, but whale is not a fish, it's a mammal. Who cares? It's living in the sea. Sharks, eels, dolphins. I use these deliberately because one of the most common questions I get is, are we allowed to use sharks? Yes, it's a fish, but they eat human beings. What's the chance of a shark eating a human being? It's like being struck with a lightning. Oh, you see that only in the movies. In the real life, sharks don't find such a delicacy called human being to eat. They are just creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They live in the sea. I never forget, one morning, I hope he's not watching, he's not listening to this. I took my father, a staunch Hanafi, to Victoria Street, Vietnamese Quarter, to get some seafood. because that particular night we're going to have some seafood with amongst the brothers. And on my list, I have to buy 10 or 20, 35 pieces of blue swimmers crabs. Crabs, blue swimmers, the crabs that live in the sea. And my father doesn't know anything about this. We went into the shop. He's looking at the fish. He likes the fish. But I went to the other side where the other crustaceans are. I begin to fill the basket. And my father says, "What are you doing?" He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm getting crabs." He said to me, "Haram, makruh, what are you doing?" I said, "Baba, with all respect, please, don't be so muta'assib. Don't be so, strict. All the three schools says it's halal. And even in Hanafi school, it's not haram, it's tahrim and makruh. It's makruh but close to haram. They don't say it's haram. Imam Shafi says," I told him, "if I see my father coming out of the sea, I'll eat him." He says, Imam Shafi must have been brought up in the Vietnamese place," he says. That's my father. Hanafi, muta'assib. He must have been, they say he must have lived among the Vietnamese. No, that's not the issue. The issue is that seafood is halal, but if you're Hanafi, strict Hanafi, we respect you. Ala ra'si wa aini. No problem. I went to Southeast Asia many times. One particular place I stayed was in Brunei. They have a particular village on stumps in the lake, in the river. Kampung Ayar they call it. Subhanallah, they've got the whole village for hundreds of years. They have a masjid, they have schools, they have houses. And when you walk, you see the water running through. Government gives them houses, cars and everything on the land. They don't want to come out. They don't want to come, they don't want to leave this place. Why? Food is for free. How? All they do is walk a couple of steps down and they put a net into the water, comes out 20 tiger prawns. Oh, ya halawa. Yeah, they make mashwiya and they're happy. So, the reason for Hanafis for calling lobsters and prawns and crabs and crustaceans as makruh, their dalil is they say anything that turns your stomach. And that, ooh, when you see, ooh. Yeah, if you lived in the inland, the only thing that you see is a fish in the river every now and then. Of course, when you see those funny creatures with legs moving around, you say, ooh. Yeah, but how about the Bruneians who live in the village where every day they eat nothing but prawns? Nothing but prawns. So, when it comes to this issue, if you're Hanafi, stick to Hanafi if you're comfortable. But if you eat crustacean seafood, if you eat seafood, do not feel that you have committed haram. It is halal to do so. Make sure that you don't put haram ingredients in it when you're cooking it. That's besides the point. Whales, brother, how can you eat whales, man? Yes. Why is whales, I use the word whales? Because it has happened during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When a group of Muslims were in Jeddah, Jeddah is the coast. There was a beach that, there was a whale that is beached onto the beach. And of course dead. Muslims have never seen such a big, huge fish. They begin to cut into pieces, they fill their sacks. They were walking inside the stomach, huge. And they brought some all the way to Mecca to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they explained the situation to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam approved it, and he also ate from that particular, whatever they brought, that fish meat, which was whale to do so. But so mammal, bro, mammal or no mammal, it lives in the sea, eat it. Okay, dolphins are the same. But dolphins are beautiful. You've been watching too many movies. You're watching too many movies. How about the eels, man? They're snakes. Who cares? They're still fish. Okay? Now, there is a technical point here. If the fish that you found are dead already, then you look at the situation. Was it trapped into a little area where there is not enough movement, not enough air for the fish? There's so many of them because all the water has risen, the high tides and low tides, so to speak, and the fish is dying or not moving, almost dead or dead. In that case, it is halal to eat that fish, dead or alive, not a problem. However, if a fish is found dead, floating without any of the restrictions that I just mentioned to you before, in other words, right in the river, plenty of space to swim, or the sea, the ocean, but the fish is just floating on top with the stomach up, don't touch that fish. It could be poisoned, could be something else, some sickness. It is haram to eat that fish. If this death of the fish is due to lack of space, or somebody, hit it, or fished it out, or something, or came into the bucket and died in the bucket, okay, it is halal to eat. And by the way, I've got some news for you. Somebody rang Medina Halal Meat Butcher. One revert sister. I was there watching. It was hilarious. They just opened up the shop new and says, brother, do you have halal cows? Yes. Do you have halal sheep? Yes. Do you have halal, who slaughters them? Such and such company, such as company. Says, do you have halal fish? Says, yes, sister. Who slaughters them? This sister doesn't know. We don't slaughter fish. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar on the fish. As soon as fish comes out of the water, is halal. Not a problem. On the other hand, if you found a floating on the tummy dead fish in the ocean, huge fish, said, oh, we can't eat it, haram. You cut it open. A whale perhaps, or dolphin perhaps, or shark perhaps. Very unlikely, depending on the shark. In the stomach, there is a fish, live, jumping up and down. You're allowed to eat that fish. Or dead fish. But this death of fish has occurred due to the confined space that it was in, not poison fish. You're allowed to eat this fish that you found in the stomach of the fish. Interesting. But if the fish in the stomach of the fish was torn into pieces, in other words, eaten, half eaten on the way going down, then you're not allowed to touch this fish. You with me? You're not allowed to touch this fish. Okay, enough of the fish. Let's go to the land. If you have any questions in terms of crustaceans, you can ask so. There are certain animals which live partly in the water and partly on the land. Mostly on the land and mostly in the water. And those are the ones that we avoid eating. Okay? Sand crabs are one of them. They are different from the water crabs. You need to be careful of. How about the shellfish? How about those the ones that you open up and what do you call it? Mussels. The oyster. Are they from the sea? Yes. Eat if you have the stomach, but cook it. I recommend it to you. Don't fall into the trap of people. Oh, it's an aphrodisiac. Before you get married, you eat a lot of these. That's stupidity. They are poisoned. And make sure that you really clean, devein your prawns, because it'll poison you. Because they're the scavengers of the earth. They are the cleaners. They eat the last. They are the last on the food chain. Whatever falls from the top, those crustaceans eat. The animals that live on the earth, on the land. Islam categorizes animals that live on the earth into 3 categories. This is actually a literal translation of the fiqh books that we have. Those without any blood. If you were to cut into pieces, there is no blood. Technically, they might have blood, but we don't see it because they're so small or something. I'm sure they have a special category in biology in terms of amongst their species. There could be some exception to the rules. We're not allowed to eat them at all. They're haram to consume. Like bees, flies, spiders, scorpions, ants, snails, slugs, worms, locusts, etc. With the exception of the grasshopper, the locust, one particular species of grasshopper, dead or alive, because this happened during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. All forms of other insects and their byproducts, they make any additives out of it or coloring out of it, is absolutely haram to consume. There is one particular additive, they use it as a food coloring in certain lollies from insects. You need to check out. It's haram to do so, haram to consume so. But brother, how can you eat the grasshopper, man? I don't make the rules. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I never forget, about 6-7 years ago, that particular year there wasn't much rain in Medina. And I've never seen so many locusts, huge mothers, big ones. They fly and they come. And they used to apparently make good kebab out of it. And they eat during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They used to eat one particular type of lizard, some sort of goanna that lives in the desert. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw it, he says, I'm not saying that it's haram, but I myself won't eat it, he says. My stomach will not take it. Yeah? So this particular grasshopper, one particular species, is halal to eat whether they are dead or alive, if you catch them alive. But no frogs, no snails, forget about being a French Muslim. Another point, although commonly regarded as insects, worms in the fruits or cheeses, not mentioning any particular cheese, mushrooms, and in vinegar, whilst the worms are still in them, in the items I just listed to you, if you find them in there while they live in it, in the apple, in the apricot, in the pear, whatever the fruit is, you begin to eat. You just realize that you have eaten 3 nice, beautiful worms. Go on inside. No, just hold on. It's halal. What are you talking about, bro? I just ate a worm. No. You know that it's even makruh to go through and look for fruit worms in the fruit. We lived at a time where there was no pesticides, no sprays for the fruit. Everything was organic. And those insects also used to share our world for thousands of years. And we used to grow fruit. I remember from my childhood, in our garden we didn't have any sprays, it was all organic. Beautiful. And of course there's a little hole that you could hardly see. An ant went, not an ant, sorry, what do you call? A worm, fruit worm went in. Sometimes when you're eating, half of it is already gone. This is permissible to eat, mubah to eat. If you don't want to eat, this is besides the point, but it's halal to eat. But in cheese or in the things that I mentioned to you, but if they're walking on the streets, they left on the table, they're walking, they left the plate. You can't take the worm and halal to eat, bismillah. That's haram to eat. Whilst they're in the fruit, can you imagine if every Muslim, it was haram to eat that fruit because it has a worm in it, how many fruits we have to chuck away into, into the rubbish. So this is something that you would never forget, inshallah ta'ala. So if you come across any fruit, if you are in a if you go to Shepperton or some other places where in the country where you need to eat fruit, no problem, eat. Nothing will happen to you. You won't die from eating a fruit worm, by the way. I've never seen a cheese worm or mushroom worm or what they call Indi vinegar. Maybe possible, but our fiqh books, they tell us that these worms also exist. Whilst they're in it, no problem. Maybe Shanklish has some, I don't know, worms in it. I have no idea. Now this particular second category is actually, this again the word damawi. Damawi means with blood. Damawi, with dam. They say without blood. Now with blood, but it doesn't bleed. Maybe scientifically speaking in biology, you will never find this classification. I asked one of our brothers to help me out. Maybe we can put proper scientific names for these creation, so that when you learn, inshallah, you say that Islam is not a backward religion or anything as such. This is classified for the common village person who's never gone to school to understand biology, or they have the technical names for it. Make sense? So you need to give credit to how it is explained in the most basic possible manner. Snakes, for example, certain snakes have more blood than majority of other reptiles. But it says snakes are regarded in this particular category. And other reptiles, porcupines, moles, rats, ferrets, mice, weasels, and all those other animals that you don't eat them, they're haram. But brother, if it's the last thing on earth and that you're dying and they put a roasted rat in front of you, are you allowed to eat it? Of course you're allowed to eat it. Because if you commit suicide, you die. Not a problem. If you die, Jahannam, because you committed suicide. There is an option for you. Although it's haram, normally, under that circumstances, it changes its status temporarily. Just for you to eat a little bit to survive, continue living. I have been given the instructions to stop because I think the food has arrived. But there are about 5 minutes. So how long to Salat? 8 minutes? Okay. There is about 15 minutes to Salat or so. What we want to do is stop here and we'll continue with our discussion because this is where certain things becoming relative to us, related to our lives. This is all wonderful, beautiful to understand. It's informative and interesting. But what's the chance of you eating a mole and a snake and a reptile or porcupine? Absolutely nothing. But when it comes to next category, which is relevant to our lives, that's where Makkahs come in. Okay, we will have a look at the horse meat and the camel meat and other meat and the methods and what have you, inshallah. All our intention is to acquire this knowledge, inshallah, so that we do not fall into haram, we do not fall into anything that is prohibited. Jazakumullahu khairul jaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our beneficial knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our fiqh of the deen, so that when we hear something that is haram, we immediately understand the reason behind it, reasoning behind it, the illah behind it, the hikmah behind it, so that it brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When in Islam somebody says it's haram, you immediately understand why it is haram. Because it has harmful effects on the body, on the intellect, on our jasad, on our badan, on our families, on everything that Islam sees as holy and sacred. These things, harams, has some impact or effect on it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our ikhlas. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our beneficial knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our a'mal al-salihah, good deeds and good works. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our certitude to Him, our yaqeen to Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala include us amongst His choices, servants, and the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you and all your loved ones, inshallah, as neighbors to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the day of judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us, and including your loved ones, with His beautiful vision, Jamalullah, from Jannatul Firdaus al-Ala, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Allahumma ij'alna minhum ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم لله تعالى الفاتحة. I think we are towards the end of our technical problems. In perhaps 1 or 2 weeks' time, if not even a shorter period, you will be able to ask questions directly, and you'll come to my system here, either through your SMSs or through your internet connection, 3G connections, or if you're watching from the home, you can directly ask questions and participate, and this becomes rather than a dialogue. This becomes a dialogue rather than a monologue. Inshallah, the whole idea is for us to benefit and learn and increase in knowledge, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khair al-jaza. Lillahi ta'ala al-Fatiha.